Ironically, it was actually bigger. Surprisingly. But he said, you know, they're all well. My wife as well. I've never dealt with mental illness firsthand, so I can't relate to you there. However, I spent over 20 years in the animal feed industry formulating feed for hogs across Western Canada and the Western United States. He said, we saw something commonplace in the hog pens called ear and tail biting syndrome, where the hogs get irritable with each other, they bite chunks of their ears and tails off each other, and if you didn't pen them away from each other, they'd actually kill each other. They were becoming homicidal. He says, you know what we learned in the animal feed industry? Is that if you just put the proper nutrition into their feed, it would completely eradicate the disorder. And even though my father had already tried so many other things, and to no avail, it was in that moment that he says it was like a light bulb flipping on. He knew it was the answer, it resonated from his head to his toes, he was given a spiritual confirmation, and he moved forward with it. They went down to a health food store, they grabbed a bunch of different products, and it didn't work. But having that confirmation, he didn't give up. He knew that the answer lied in nutrition. And so, they continued on. And finally, by January 18th of 1996, it came across 4 different products consisting of a colloidal mineral supplement, a calcium, magnesium, and phosphorus supplement, a multivitamin grapeseed extract. And it worked. Within 5 days, Joseph said it was like a fog lifted and he could now see what was right and wrong. So here he had been engaging in all these destructive behaviors before, and he didn't really realize the impact that it was having on everyone around him. Now he could see. Now he could make a good or bad choice with a clear conscience, knowing what the impact was going to be. Within 30 days, he would have no longer been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. He wasn't 100% well by any means by that point, but he was now operating in what we call, I guess, the normal range. His highs weren't too high and his lows weren't too low. He was now having normal good and bad days. And as time went on, he just got better and better. Now Autumn, my father phoned her up and all enthusiastic saying, we've got an answer, it's worked for Joseph, it's gonna work for you. And she said, Dad, I'm working with a psychiatrist who just put me on these medications. And he says if I rock the boat and play around with the medications, then I'm gonna die. And so she wasn't willing to entertain the idea. And of all people, her father, an engineer, a property manager, how would he have the answer that, psychiatrists and doctors didn't have, right? So she just wasn't willing to entertain it at all. Well, fortunately, she had to come and stay with us about a month later. She had to come stay with us for a week while her husband worked a night shift at a factory, and there was nobody to watch over her, and she had to be under 24-hour watch or in a psych ward. So she came and stayed with us, a day and a half into her stay. She had a severe panic attack, went suicidal, and my father at this point just said, look, we're not doing this, I'm not babysitting you. You're getting onto these supplements. And so he says, to be politically correct, he did not force her to take the supplements, he just merely compelled her to take the supplements. I don't know if it looks any different, but at the end of the day, it was against her will. But she got on them, her husband found out about it, and it's a real good thing, there was about a 5-hour drive between her husband and my dad. I don't blame him. I can only imagine living with your wife, seeing this roller coaster, seeing the instability, seeing the multiple specialists over the years, visiting in the psych ward as she'd spent numerous occasions there. And now your father-in-law has this idea that he's going to correct her. So anyways, when he got there at the end of the week to pick her up, and he saw his wife becoming a new woman, he was convinced that there was actually something there. She wasn't even close to being well after those 5 days, but her hallucinations had gone away. She was now taking care of her own hygiene. She was now able to conversate logically. These things that we take for granted. She no longer was experiencing those things. She was actually able to take responsibility. Something that many of us dread. She got to do. And so, they continued on with it, and after 45 days, they had her off of all her medications. We learned how addictive some of these medications can be and how bad the withdrawal effects can be from them. So we learned a lesson that it's not safe to just drop your medications. And so we've developed a support program since then to help people come off their medications safely and effectively if their doctors aren't willing to work with them. And so we've done that. But after 45 days, she thought she was 100% well. She wasn't, just like Joseph wasn't after 30 days, but she was now operating in that normal range. She would have no longer qualified for a diagnosis. She was going grocery shopping on her own. No longer required supervision at home, was taking care of the affairs of the house. As time went on, she got better and better and better. Now that should have been the end of the story. My father's prayers of desperation had been answered. His family was receiving the restoration that he was so desperately pleading for. And there was a lot of healing that was taking place in the home. The dynamics of all the relationships were changing. We all began to see Joseph through a different light. We didn't need to fear him anymore. He was happy and sociable. And he began to see us through a new light. Well, growing up in a small community of 3,500 people, and just about everybody knowing who Joseph was, and knowing the trouble that he had been before, and observing that dark energy that was about him, that dark spirit that he had had, of anger and hostility, volatility, and seeing that it was gone and that he was now happy and sociable, people began to ask my father questions, saying, what have you done with him? Like it was a night and day difference. And they began to ask other questions. Do you think he'd work with my wife with depression or my son with ADD? My father would just say, I don't know. You work for bipolar disorder. These are the 4 products we're using. Try it out and see. And so people began to try it out, and it was working. It was working on all sorts of mental health conditions. Turns out the nutrition did not respect those boxes that we put these diagnoses in. It was just working across the board, feeding the brain and correcting things. And so my father took a look at this and said, whoa, think of all the lives that could be blessed. Think of all the families that could be restored, just like my family was. We need to get this information to the hands of doctors, thinking that just because it's working, it'd be readily accepted. So in his naivety, he attempted to do that. And he went and approached Dr. Brian Kolb out of the University of Lethbridge, a world-renowned neuroscientist who actually discovered that brain cell regeneration could take place, ironically using 22 vitamins and minerals. My father approached him and said, hey, this is what we're finding. Do you think you can study it? He said, no, I don't do those kinds of studies. But Dr. Bonnie Kaplan out of the University of Calgary does. So my father went to approach her, and she just blew him off. She said, you know, I dealt with all the flakes in the 80s regarding nutrition, and I just don't have the time to waste. So my father went back to Dr. Brian Kolb, who was quite accommodating, and said, okay, well, I have the symptom evaluation forms they would typically use in those studies. I'll supply them to you, postmark directly back to me. You give them to the people that will use the products, and we'll see what comes of it. Well, my father did that. And in a short period of time, Dr. Brian Kolb got back in touch with my father and said, we got some really significant numbers here. I'm going to forward them on to Dr. Bonnie Kaplan, and we'll see what comes of it. She took a look at this and said, this is either complete snake oil and there's fraud going on, or we are onto a potential medical breakthrough. And so she sat down with my older sister, Autumn, and my father, and interviewed them, and was convinced that my sister Autumn was not the individual that she was made out to be on black and white, that she was not an individual that was in need of intensive psychiatric care, that she was actually well. And so she took 12 bipolar patients and began to study them, and saw tremendous results within a very short period of time, just like we had observed in our own home, and just like community members had seen when they applied it. And so she was convinced that there was something there, but then halfway through the study, people began to relapse. Their symptoms began to return. But it wasn't just happening in the study, it was also happening at home. So the University of Calgary did an analysis on the 4 different products and found that the colloidal mineral supplement that was being used, that it varied in its levels of minerals depending upon the batch. It was a inconsistent product producing inconsistent results, which is not sound to research. You cannot research something that's a variable in itself. So the study was shut down and we were left looking for a replacement. Well, after a great deal of trial and error, my father came to the realization we need to develop our own supplement that's going to produce the results that we need. And so, after having tried so many other supplements that hadn't worked in the past, and realizing that there was something to this, something to the original 4 products, he realized that he was almost kind of hopeless again. If other companies weren't producing products that were able to make meaningful life change in the field of mental health, who was he, an engineer, to produce a product that would? So he was still with his colleague at that time who had worked in the animal feed industry, and the two of them set out and they began to spend a lot of time praying, fasting, seeking for some kind of inspiration that would lead them in that right direction again. They did a lot of research, they were led in different directions, they teamed up with a great company out of the US that had great processing techniques for the minerals. that would allow for you to absorb them. And what came out of it was Empower Plus. Something that didn't even need to be really tested, trial and error, and corrected. My father says it was basically a 1 in a million chance that the formula would have came together and worked right off the bat. But it was done, and it did work. And people's lives were being changed just like they were on those 4 other products. However, even though it was a high-quality multivitamin, really, consisting of 36 different ingredients, that being 16 minerals, 14 vitamins, 3 amino acids, and 3 antioxidants, even though it was a broad-spectrum multivitamin that was bioavailable, and it was changing lives, what we realized is that the majority of people that had an acute mental illness and were in dire need of help, they didn't appreciate the fact that they had to take up to 48 capsules per day. It was basically a meal in itself. Yes, it saved on the grocery bill, but eating that many capsules just wasn't fun. You're going to see half numbers there. Those are the maintenance doses, right? So after somebody comes to us, they're suicidal, they're extremely depressed, they take the 48 capsules per day, they're feeling great, they can generally go down to about 24 capsules a day and maintain. Still far too much. And so, in 2000, the formula remained the same, but the chelation, the way those minerals were being bound to organic molecules, was changed. And as a result, got it down to 32 caps per day. Still too much, right? I don't know anybody here who wants to take 32 capsules per day. So in 2001, we began to micronize those minerals, just like those worms in the soil would be micronizing the minerals. As a result of just doing that, same formulation, got it down to 18 caps per day. In 2005, we developed our own chelation technology, mimicking what was taking place within the soil. As a result, got it down to 15 caps per day. And then that technology was further improved in 2013, getting it down to 8 to 12 capsules per day. So the exact same formulation, and yet today you can take 1/4 the amount that you once had to take and achieve the same life-changing results. So it was produced, oh sorry, let me go back 1 second. And that's all because we took a look at what nature was doing. Because the way that this plant was created, it was created properly. What's happening in the soil when it's unadulterated, when you don't spray these toxic chemicals in the soil, what happens in there is ideal and allows for food to thrive. And so we mimicked what would happen in an ideal situation. We mimicked that in the lab and produced our supplements in that same form so that your body can actually put them to use. And that's what made all the difference. Even though the ingredients from the first one to the last one are the same ingredients, and the same balance, and same ratio. So the product was produced, it was brought back to Dr. Bonnie Kaplan after we had seen the same results, if not better than those original 4 products. She was excited to study it. She took 10 bipolar patients, put them on it, got extremely excited in a very short period of time that she actually published the preliminary results before the study was even completed. This